Okay, so when I finished college in Nigeria, I was hired by a newspaper called the National Concord to be a rookie reporter for the paper. And I went to visit a friend of mine who happened to be from Chinua Achebe's hometown. Of course, I had read Achebe's Things Fall Apart and other novels as a high school student and just been captivated by the stories that he tells in these novels. And so I was visiting her and I kept raving and raving about Chinua Achebe, and I said to her, I wished I was from Ogidi so that Achebe and I would have something, I could claim a kind of kinship with Achebe. And she listened to me with a bit of curiosity and interest, and then she says to me, do you know that Chinua Achebe is my uncle? I said, wow, he is. And she said, yes, and his home is really just a few yards away from her own home. I said, it is? And she said, and he happened to be home that weekend, and she asked me, would you want to meet him? And I couldn't believe it. So we walked over to Achebe's house, and I still remember the warmth with which he welcomed us. And he offered me cookies and a bottle of Coke. And I spent hours talking to Achebe. As I was about to leave, I told him I had just got a job with this newspaper and that I would want to interview him. Achebe gave me his home number, and he said, whenever you're ready, let me know. As soon as I reported at the paper, I told the editor that I had Achebe's contact and that he would give me an interview anytime I wanted. The editor there and then said, that's your first assignment. Paid my flight ticket to fly out and go and interview Achebe. So Achebe and I went to his office, and for 3 hours I asked him questions. I read all his books several times over. I read his interviews. I read all his essays. And so for 3 hours I was interviewing Chinua Achebe. At the end of which I returned to my hotel room, and some of my friends came over to see me, and they were curious to listen to Achebe, to hear a bit of his voice. And I brought out my tape recorder and I pressed play. There was not one word. Then I put in another tape, I pressed play, there was no word. So somehow I had interviewed Achebe for 3 hours, but my tape recorder had malfunctioned, so that I didn't have a word that Achebe had said. And so in panic, I called his home and I apologized, and I said, look, if I return to Lagos without an interview, I'm going to lose my job. I said, but I know I took a lot of your time. Would you give me just 20 minutes? Let me come back the next day and interview you for just 20 minutes. And Achebe and anybody who knew him testified to his generosity and graciousness. And Achebe said to me, I'm not available tomorrow, but you come in 2 days and I'll give you as much time as you want. And so 2 days later, I went back, and Achebe went with me to his office, and we spent 2.5 hours doing another interview. But this time around, I made sure that I took 2 tape recorders, and every 5 minutes I said, let me check that these tape recorders were doing their jobs. And so a few years later, actually many years later, I was teaching in an American college, and Achebe came to talk, and I was invited to introduce him. And I told my audience that I wasn't going to give a conventional introduction, and I introduced Achebe by telling this story of the way in which he saved my professional career. Hey! Hello.